Hi, everyone. This is Mike Saunders, Director of R&D at Unicity. I'm excited to be able to talk to you all today about gene expression. We talk about gene expression a lot. We talk about genomeceutical a lot. And unfortunately, not everyone knows what that means. So I'm here to try and clarify the picture a little bit and to give everyone an idea what genomeceutical is, what gene expression is, and why it's so important and why it makes Unicity so unique. So first, in order to talk about gene expression, we need to be able to understand what a nucleic acid is. What is DNA? We've heard a lot about DNA on TV shows, forensic files, CSI, things like that. DNA is basically like a fingerprint that's different for every single person. What it actually is a big, long polymer. A polymer is a whole bunch of small building blocks attached together. If you think of nylon, for example, nylon rope, that's a polymer. DNA is kind of like a really, really long strand of nylon rope. If you were to take DNA out of a cell and stretch it, it could stretch all the way around the world. So it's a big, long molecule that's packed really tightly into the cell. And why is it important? The reason why DNA is important is because it contains all of the instructions, the recipe, if you will, for how to create whatever animal the DNA is within. So in a human being, every single cell in my body has a nucleus. Inside that nucleus is DNA. And that DNA contains the code for everything in my whole body. That's what makes me me, is the code in my cells, in my DNA. So what does DNA actually look like? This is a picture of a small piece of DNA, and it kind of shows up close, zoomed in really close, what it looks like. It consists of a backbone. The backbone isn't really all that important for our discussion right now, but what is important is these little base pairs, the A, G, C, and T. These base pairs, what's shown here is actually DNA comes in two strands. So here is two strands of DNA, one strand on the left, the other strand on the right, and the base pairs complement each other. They match up in a very specific way so that A's are always matched up with T's, G's are always matched up with C's. That's just the way it always works. That's part of the code of DNA. That's something important to remember for later. Now, as I said before, DNA is a really, really, really long molecule. So it has to be wrapped up really, really tight and compressed inside your body and your cells. If you start to unravel DNA, pull it apart, small sections of DNA are what are called genes. So this is a picture of a chromosome. And if you were to take that chromosome and just like pulling a thread on a sweater, pull some out, one small section on that thread would be a gene. Now, the important thing about a gene is that a gene codes for a specific protein. We have proteins in our body that do all sorts of different functions. We have our muscles that are made out of protein. That's what everybody kind of thinks about. But there's all sorts of enzymes, all sorts of things that are going on in my body at any given time that need these proteins to catalyze the reactions. So genes are critically important for body structure, for metabolic health, to catalyze all the reactions that are going on all the time. And what these genes are is little pieces of information that are the recipe for individual proteins. Now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about gene expression. Basically, what gene expression means is taking a gene, reading it, using that information to create a protein. Now, there's a big, long process that is used in our body to go from a gene to a protein. It's actually really complicated. I'm going to try and simplify it as much as possible. The first step is something called transcription. Now, if you look at this picture, it shows the chromosome where all that DNA is wound up really tight. and then it shows somebody pulling on the thread, and then it zooms in closer and closer, and you can see part of it, there's a double helix. Now, your body can't read the DNA when the base pairs are attached together in a double helix. So what happens is there's special proteins in your body that help pull apart and fit in between the two strands of DNA, and it uses one of those strands to read and copy into another piece of nucleic acid called an RNA piece. Now, there's a couple of things about this picture that are actually pretty interesting. Remember how I said before, the A's always attached to the T's and the G's always attached to the C's? Well, in the case of RNA, there's no such thing as T's anymore. Now they're U's. So you'll notice on this picture that you have on the DNA strand, you have A's, T's, G's, and C's. Those are the base pairs on the DNA. And matching up with those are U's, A's, C's, and G's. So as we copy the strand of DNA into a strand of RNA, it's very, very precise that we get a matching base pair across from each one. In the case of RNA, U's match with A's. In the case of DNA, remember, A's and T's matched. So all the T's are replaced with U's, but other than that, it's basically an exact copy of the RNA. Now, the piece of RNA is a small piece. It's not the entire strand of DNA. It's only that one gene sequence. So when the RNA is finished being copied, you get a direct copy of the gene in the DNA that's actually going to be used. That piece is called messenger RNA. And that's a critical piece because that's the piece that encodes for the protein that your body actually uses to create the protein. That's what transcription is, going from DNA to a matching piece of RNA called messenger RNA. So what is messenger RNA? As I said before, messenger RNA is basically the direct copy of the gene. So that is, if you think of DNA as an entire recipe book, messenger RNA is a single recipe for making a single protein. Now, if I want to make a cake and somebody throws me a 20,000 page book that has a single recipe for a cake in it, it's going to take me a long time to find that. So it's nice to have just that single page that has just that one recipe that I'm looking for. Now we have to go on to gene translation. Gene translation is the process of taking that little strand of messenger RNA and creating a protein out of it. Basically, on that strand of messenger RNA, each base pair can be broken up into sequences of 3. And those sequences of 3, they call them codons at this point. The 3 base pairs together are called codons. Those code for another type of RNA called transfer RNA, the tRNA. Now, tRNA is a unique piece of RNA that only has 3 base pairs on it. And each piece of tRNA is unique. Each one that has 3 base pairs on it is unique, and they all attach to a specific amino acid. So by changing the sequence of codons of those 3 base pairs in the messenger RNA and then the complementary piece in the transfer RNA, you actually get different amino acids that are coded for. So our body looks at the messenger RNA, looks at each section of 3 base pairs, each codon, and then uses transfer RNA to start attaching amino acids together in a specific sequence based on those codons. And that's how we create proteins. Proteins are just basically a group of amino acids stuck together. And depending on the sequence and the order that you stick those amino acids together in, you create different proteins. So that's what transcription is. That's how messenger RNA is converted into protein through the process of translation. Proper gene expression is absolutely critical for human health. In order to prevent inflammation, your body has long, complicated cascades of reactions that happen. whether it's inflammation, whether it is any process that your body's doing, just moving, thinking, breathing, causes cascades of reaction to happen. And depending on what we do every day, depending on what we eat every day, gene expression actually alters. So if I exercise every day, after a while, I have higher levels of certain proteins being expressed because my gene expression has changed. And those higher levels of specific protein actually help me with things like overall metabolic health, weight loss, all sorts of different factors. Diet is another critical element that affects gene expression. If I'm looking at a person who eats high levels of processed foods all the time, their body expresses different genes. They start having problems over time with insulin sensitivity and things like that. And a big piece of that, yeah, processed foods are unhealthy, but part of the reason why is because they alter our gene expression. If I'm not getting enough sleep at night, I actually start to alter my gene expression in a negative way. If I'm under a lot of stress, you've heard about cortisol, that's the stress hormone. If I'm under a lot of stress, gene expression alters and cortisol levels start to rise. Other hormones start to drop. This is because of changes in gene expression. Now, I want to introduce you to a term called epigenetics. Epigenetics is another factor that controls gene expression. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it more on the next slide here. Epigenetics is basically one of the main ways that gene expression is controlled in our bodies. And if we think about epigenetics, one of the things with epigenetics is it's basically hereditary gene expression. So what epigenetics is placement of very specific markers on sections of DNA. And if I have these specific markers, then my DNA folds in specific ways, and that prevents or helps gene expression happen, depending on where and how these markers are located. Now, if I'm a person whose parents were very sedentary, who ate high carbohydrate meals all the time, they have a specific gene expression. And then over time, that gene expression gets encoded into their DNA through epigenetics, through the way that their DNA is marked. They can actually pass that down onto their kids, giving their kids kind of a little bit of instead of a head start, the opposite, setting them back a little bit as far as potential for diabetes and obesity and things like that. So epigenetics, one critical piece of gene expression, and not just critical, something that we want to think about because it's actually hereditary. It's something that we can pass down gene expression from father to son, mother to daughter, mother to son. And we can either give our kids a head start by having healthy gene expression, or we can start them off a little bit behind by having unhealthy gene expression patterns. And these are patterns that, as I said, they have to build up over a lifetime. Now, when we talk about nature versus nurture, this is a big part of where epigenetics comes in. Our genes, our DNA is set. It is something that we are literally born with. We will always have. It will never change. The pattern of the markers on our DNA, that can change. That's something, like I said, that can be hereditary, but we can change it through our lives. I may start off with a very healthy gene expression based on my parents being very healthy, exercising, eating well, getting a lot of fruits and vegetables in their diet, reducing the amount of junk carbohydrates that they're eating. But if I, over years, have that poor diet, that poor exercise habits, if I'm not consuming proper healthy supplements, then I can actually start to have my gene expression go into an unhealthy way. I can start to have a system that is no longer as good as what I was born with. And then I can pass that system on to my kids and give them a situation where they're not even starting off as good as I was. So generation to generation, if nothing changes, it can actually get worse and worse as far as gene expression goes. Now, remember what I was talking about with messenger RNA. Messenger RNA was that little piece of RNA. It was the single recipe for a specific protein. There's another way that our body deals with gene expression, and this is actually a much more rapid way of controlling gene expression, and that's called microRNA. So our body actually creates microRNA all the time as a method to try and inhibit certain genes from being expressed. So microRNA is a really small piece of RNA that attaches specifically to certain pieces of messenger RNA. If we're making too much of a specific protein, for example, say we've been really stressed and our cortisol levels are really high, then our stress levels start to come down. Our body's still producing tons of cortisol because we still have that loop with the messenger RNA coming out and being expressed. The first thing that our body does to start to stop that is create a piece of microRNA. And that piece of microRNA attaches specifically to the messenger RNA. And now, instead of having an open single piece, you have something that looks a lot more like the double helix section of DNA. Remember how I said when the base pairs in DNA are paired up together, that's really a resting state. Your body can't do anything with it. That's what microRNA does. It blocks the protein from being created because it blocks your body's ability to read the messenger RNA by attaching specifically to certain messenger RNAs. So our body uses this microRNA to regulate gene expression. And we know that we can affect microRNA levels through what we eat, certain nutrients that we can get in plants, certain foods that we can eat, and unicity products can actually change microRNA expression. We recently came out with a patent specifically on our core health products, looking at gene regulation through microRNA production. This is actually a brand new, totally unique patent. That's something that there is no other company out there that can say this. They don't regulate genes the way that we regulate genes. We do something different. We control gene expression through microRNA. And that allows you to actually have a healthier metabolism. That allows you to continue to, the end. Anyway, good enough.